Have you ever looked at the world or even your own life and wondered why evil seems to rise so quickly? Why pride gets promoted? Why corrupt people gain influence? Why those who do wrong seem to prosper? Esther chapter 3 speaks directly into that tension because this is the chapter where evil gets really loud. A wicked man rises to power, hatred becomes policy, and destruction is decreed. And yet, even here, God is still working. Today, we're walking through Esther chapter 3, and we're going to see that just because darkness gets louder does not mean God has lost control. Sometimes it feels like that, right? Let's look at Esther 3 1 to 2. After these things, King Xerxes promoted Haman the Agagite and advanced him and set his throne above all the officials, and all the king's servants bowed down and paid homage to Haman, for the king had so commanded. That gets interesting. Haman is promoted. He gains position, he gets power, influence, and recognition. And immediately we see a hard truth. Sometimes wicked people rise. That can be very frustrating. We expect evil to be punished quickly, but scripture often shows that evil may rise for a season only to fall later. Promotion is not always approval. Power is not always proof of righteousness, and title does not equal character. Esther 3:2, as we continue, says, But Mordecai did not bow down or pay homage. He was not bowing to Haman. Everyone else was bowing, but Mordecai stood. He would not compromise his convictions to honor pride. That is courage. Because standing when everyone else kneels will cost you something. And some of you know that tension all too well. Standing for truth at work, standing for holiness in culture, standing for conviction when compromise would be so much easier. Mordecai reminds us you do not have to bow just because everyone else does. Esther 3 5 to 6 tells us when Haman saw that Mordecai did not bow down, Haman was filled with fury. He disdained to lay hands on Mordecai alone, so he sought to destroy all the Jews. So he wasn't content with the one. This reveals Haman's heart. One man refuses him, and he wants genocide to punish everybody. That is what pride does when challenged. Pride becomes rage, entitlement becomes cruelty, ego becomes oppression. Haman doesn't just hate Mordecai, he hates what Mordecai represents: identity, conviction, faithfulness. Darkness often reacts violently when someone refuses to submit to it. Esther 3 through 7 says, In the first month they cast pur, that is, they cast lots, before Haman day after day. What does that mean? They cast lots to choose the day of destruction. Haman thinks chance is serving him, but providence is overruling him. Even the date chosen by hatred will later become the date remembered for deliverance. That is how God works. The enemy chooses a day for defeat, and God turns it around into a testimony, into a victory. Esther 3 8 to 9. There is a certain people scattered abroad. Their laws are different. It is not to the king's profit to tolerate them. This is what Haman says to King Xerxes. He doesn't identify the people. Notice the strategy. He lies. He generalizes. He dehumanizes. He presents an entire people group as a threat. This pattern repeats throughout history. When people want to oppress others, they often begin by redefining them as dangerous, less than, or unwanted. The Bible exposes that darkness clearly. Esther 3:10 to 11. So the king took his signet ring and gave it to Haman. That was significant, guys. Xerxes hands his authority to the wrong man. Leadership without discernment becomes very dangerous. He gives power away casually. He authorizes destruction thoughtlessly. This chapter warns us power in the hands of pride creates suffering. Esther 3:13. Letters were sent to destroy, to kill, and to annihilate all Jews, young and old, women and children. The decree is public. The threat is very real. The fear would have been overwhelming. Imagine reading that order if you were Jewish in Persia at that time. No safety, no future, no protection. But here's what they did not know. God had already placed Esther in the palace before the decree was ever written. God had already begun the answer. Esther 3:15 tells us the king and Haman sat down to drink, but the city of Susa was thrown into confusion. That verse is chilling. Think about it. The people are confused. Lives are threatened. And the powerful sit down for drinks. This is what selfish leadership looks like. Detached from pain, unmoved by suffering, uncomfortable while others panic. But God sees all of it. He's not blind. So what does this mean for us? Maybe you're in an Esther 3 type season. A hard report came in. An unfair decision was made. Someone used power against you. Something dark feels very loud right now. Remember this truth. Just because the enemy made a plan does not mean he gets the final word. Before Haman rose, God had already positioned Esther. Before the decree was announced, God had already begun deliverance. Before your battle became visible, God was already moving. Isaiah 54:17. No weapon that is fashioned against you shall succeed. No weapon shall prosper. Esther 3 teaches us that evil may get loud, but it is never ultimate. Hatred may rise, darkness may scheme, pride may posture, but God is still sovereign. Stand firm, stay faithful, trust God. And if you're walking through a hard chapter right now, remember, the story is not over in chapter 3. If this has encouraged you, subscribe and continue this Esther journey with me. Because the God who was working then is still working today. Have a blessed day.